Hola chicos, welcome back. Today we're here to review reflexive verbs in the present tense. Remember, at any time you can refer back to your textbook on page 7 for more information, or just to, have it next to you. Sometimes people like to see instead of just listening. So chicos, let's go and kind of think back to indirect object pronouns. With indirect object pronouns, we've seen these before: me, te, le, nos, os, and les. And we've used them, for example, with me gusta. A Roberto le gusta. So we've seen indirect object pronouns before, and we've used them before. So what we're going to see is the me, te, nos, and os will be used for the reflexive verbs. But let's review a little bit about these indirect object pronouns before we get into the reflexive verbs. One thing that's always important is to figure out, well, where do we put these indirect object pronouns? And if we can remember, it's also, or can also be before a conjugated verb or attached to the end of an infinitive. That's going to carry over when we deal with the reflexive pronouns and reflexive verbs. So we just want to keep that in mind. So here we have an example. ¿Le vas a dar libro a Elena? Sí, le voy a darlo, or dar el libro a Elena. With this one here, we can see that the le, the indirect object pronoun, is in front of the conjugated verb, vas. Okay, and the second, the answer, again, we put the le in front of the conjugated verb boy. But now, the second example, we have vas a darle el libro a Elena. Here's our first verb, vas, but I've now attached le to the infinitive dar, which is what we see again in the second answer. Okay. So like I said, we're going to be learning about reflexive verbs, and they have pronouns that are very similar to indirect object pronouns and are used, like I said earlier, in a very similar way. But still, make sure you have your indirect object pronouns memorized, because you don't want to get them confused with the reflexive pronouns. Now, reflexive verbs. We've seen these before, so again, I said we're just reviewing. If you need more help, then you can always come and see me. Okay, so reflexive verbs are used to tell that a person does something to or for himself. Another thing too is that the reflexive verbs have two parts. We need a reflexive pronoun. We need this reflexive pronoun to let us know who's doing the action to him or herself. And then we need the verb form, of course, because we need to know what are they doing. Okay, so por ejemplo, we have lavarse. Lavar is our verb, and the reflexive pronoun is se, to wash oneself. Okay. In English, what's a little strange is we don't really think about using reflexive verbs, or when we do talk about actions we do to oneself, we don't think about them having to say, myself I wash, himself he bathes. We don't speak like that, but when we look at the Spanish, we don't translate it that way as well, but the order is going to be just like that. So we're going to say Lauren brushes her hair, Scott bathes himself. And in these two examples, we're actually using reflexive verbs. So let's see. Again, these are actions that are being done to oneself or by oneself. I wash my hair. Another way that we would think about this, especially in Spanish, is I wash my own hair. Okay, I'm doing this to myself, and therefore we're going to need these reflexive pronouns. Me, te, se, nos, os, or se. And notice with the English, me means to or for myself. Okay, so just to, I'm doing this to myself, or I'm doing this for myself, depending on what the verb may be. Okay, so again, these are important. We definitely need to use reflexive pronouns with the reflexive verbs. Take a moment to copy these down. I will continue, but remember you can pause. So, translations for the verb lavarse, por ejemplo. I wash myself. You wash yourself. He, she, or it washes himself, herself, etc. Okay? So just to know the different translations. How do we translate a reflexive verb? Because if we look, here we have the full conjugated verb. The me here is in front. So am I saying myself I wash? Yourself you wash? Well, no, because that's not really how we speak in English, but it would be good to remember that's the order in which we'd write them down or say them in Spanish. Now, remember, like the indirect object pronouns, Reflexive pronouns are very similar in the sense that they can go before a conjugated verb, or you can attach them to the infinitive. Take a look. Me voy a lavar el pelo. Here we've placed me in front of the verb. O voy a lavarme el pelo. In this case, I have attached the me to the infinitive. These answers for the before the verb and the after the infinitive are both correct. Okay, but you do need to familiarize yourself with the fact that you can place them in two different spots. Let's do a few more verbs. Okay, so here we have CPR-se. Please notice that on the bottom of this page, I did write a little note that please notice the ending of the verb, the part that is underlined, needs to agree with the reflexive pronoun. For example, if I'm dealing with the yo form, well, notice it is cepillo. It has the yo form ending, but we are also using the reflexive pronoun me. Why? Because me means myself, or to or for myself, and that's the only one that makes sense to say I am brushing myself or brushing my teeth, por ejemplo. Okay, so please note the endings of the verbs and the reflexive pronoun should agree with one another. Let's take a look at ducharse. Okay, same idea. Okay, notice the endings agree with the reflexive pronoun. Okay, one thing that's a little different when we are dealing Spanish is that when we're talking about body parts, we're going to use a definite article, meaning instead of saying I am washing my, or not washing, I am brushing my teeth, we would say I am brushing the teeth. Okay, so this is a little different. So, por ejemplo, we have nos lavamos el pelo, we're washing, and they would say the hair, but we know it's our hair. Okay, for example, the other example here we have is te cepillas los dientes. Are you brushing? And the direct translation is, are you brushing the teeth? That's not what we say in English, but again, what's implied is, are you brushing your teeth? Okay, but in Spanish, notice that they're using el and los, not like nuestra or tus. Okay, it's a little different. Our last slide here is for you to do some practice. Okay, and let's take a look. First, why don't you go on to core page 3, or you can do this after, and also big book pages 9 and 10. Both of these sets will deal with reflexive verbs. And if we go to the link that I have right here, the PH School link, I'm just going to click on over, and I will move the screen on over. All right, so again, this is something you can find in the textbook where the phschool.com website is, and you type in the web code. You're going to just complete each of the following sentences by choosing the correct reflexive verb and conjugating the verb in the present tense. Remember, chicos, recuerdas, por favor, you need two parts. So, por ejemplo, número uno, we have necesitas. Well, look, we're starting with a conjugated verb. I have to choose, is it lavarse or is it ponerse? Okay, so we decide which verb it is, but I need two parts. I need the reflexive pronoun and I need the conjugated verb. Possible, because we have to see if there's a conjugated verb already. Do I conjugate two verbs right next to each other? Ding, 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 ding. No. Muy bien. Buena suerte y nos vemos mañana. Remember that these activities are for tarea. Nos vemos. Adiós.